guys, want to do a little weekly video and focus in a little bit more on the next stage of development. We are getting into adolescence, and this is a little more difficult to explain as far as the stage. So just kind of let me kind of step back and kind of look at this word. Adolescence is what we consider a social construct. We made it up. It was actually basically created early in the 20th century by a researcher named G. Stanley Hall. And what he realized doing his research was that kids need more development and they need to have more education. Because you have to think about the early 20th century, we were heading into an industrial age where basically it was 8th grade education, you graduated, and then you went into factories. It was considered what we call the Gilded Age. If you read The Great Gatsby, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So G. Stanley Hall was a huge factor and influencer in this concept of what we call adolescence. And again, it's a social construct. We made it up. So as developmentalists and researchers, we kind of look at adolescence not so much as a specific stage of development that we've talked about so far. So far we've had infancy, toddler, early childhood, middle, late childhood, and now of course adolescence. So we kind of look at adolescence as a transitional period. And when you think about how long adolescence, this transitional period, occurs. Most people think that adolescence starts maybe around 12 to 13. The argument is, when does it actually end? Some people say, well, let's go by the brain development. Some people say, let's go by, a specific age like 21, 22. But even then, just think about how huge and how long that amount is. So when we think about adolescence, and here's something to keep in mind, that it is kind of a transitional period between not being a child anymore and learning how to be an adult. So you think about pre-teens and then teens and then kind of getting up there. In fact, we even now have this concept from 19 to 25 as an emerging adult. We're still going to give you time to practice being adult. You can't just say, okay, they're 21, that's that adult now. We made that up. When you think about 18, I'm an adult. That was created, during World War II, and we needed boots on the ground, so let's say 18. So we know as researchers that it takes a long time, and some people are slower than others, between learning not to be that child and learning how to be an adult, and even learning how to be an emerging adult. So by the time you are 25, 26, and the brain actually finishes developing at that time, you can go forward and now into the young adult phase. So some of the areas that I want you to focus your readings on with adolescence is one of the most important developmental milestones in adolescence is puberty. And even puberty has changed over the years. Now, some researchers say that puberty is occurring 6 months earlier and earlier every year. So the onset for girls is like 9.5, boys 11. So we can even see, the puberty starting to change. And it's this myth that, this entire adolescent time they're going through puberty. Puberty can begin and end just as fast. Some people, it takes, puberty is a little bit later in their teen years. Some it starts very early. Some it's over. Some, it takes a long time. Some people are still developing, still growing, even at 21, 22. So again, puberty is kind of that mark, that benchmark of adolescence. But there's other things going on as well. How people think at this time is starting to change. If you look at Piaget and you look at formal operation, some propose post-formal operation. You're still reasoning and still thinking. In fact, it's almost hypothetical thinking. You're trying to think, if I do this, this is going to be the outcome. Kids sometimes don't think that, but adolescents are learning to process that information. So thinking starts to change in an adolescent. And I can go back to the maturity again. Some adolescents I've spoken to are very mature, very, very mature at 15 and 16. And there are some people at 20 and 21 that are not at that mature level yet. Again, you just can't lump everybody in this fishbowl and say this is how they all behave, think, and act, and everything else. Also, too, emotional development. Some people mature emotionally. They're ready for relationships. They're ready to go out. They're ready to work into the fields that they want to go into. But again, everybody develops and matures emotionally at different ages as well. So adolescence is a very important transitional period, and it's a preparation period to practice what it's going to be like being that adult in all of the domains that we talk about, whether the physical changes, cognitive changes, how we think, and even the social emotional changes of our personality. Our personality is still developing. And keep in mind that your genes are still affected by the environment, even in adolescence. Just because you become an adolescent, the genes are like, okay, I'm done. Your genes are still influencing you. But think about what your genes are being influenced by. Friends, peer groups, school. They say school does really affect you in adolescence, your high school socialization and how you participate in school. So all of those factors go into that development and how the lifespan during adolescence is affected by all of the different social environments that teens are experienced and what they go through. So those are some things I want you to focus on. It's a really great transitional period. My mother was a high school teacher, so I grew up around adolescents. So I think I had an easier time working with adolescents when I was going through my master's and doctorate. When I was working with teens, I did anger management with teenagers. I worked a lot with kids who were ADD, ADHD, ODD, conduct disorder. So I really got the full picture, I think, being influenced by my mom, who was a high school teacher, and hearing her stories and hearing how she interacted with adolescents. I think I had kind of a different picture when I started working with them. So that's what I want you to focus on this week, adolescence. Some of you might still be adolescents taking this class, so now you can really reflect on, okay, that's affecting me, that's not. So it really is a good time to reflect back on your teen years. So let me know if you have any problems with that. Focus on the concepts, focus on the terms, and have a great week. Bye.